The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Adding Enterprise Storage to AWS, a Customer's Journey. I'm particularly pleased to offer this webinar today because I like telling stories about customers, and I think I like hearing stories about customers as well, so I hope you'll enjoy hearing this too. We're going to talk today about one of our customers here at Zadara, SpendHQ, and how we worked with them and AWS to create a full-featured enterprise storage system that helps SpendHQ achieve its business objectives. So, without further ado, let's dive in and get rolling. Today's speakers. I'm Greg Newman. You can see my happy smiling face right there in the middle. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Matthew Watts, Manager of Application Development at SpendHQ. Hi, Matthew.
Hello.
Excellent. Thank you for being with us. And also today we have Anthony Fiore, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS. Hi, Anthony.
Hello.
Good. Okay, everybody's microphone is working. There we go. First test passed. This is going to be about a half an hour of us presenting. The three of us will be presenting to you, the listeners and the viewers. And as we go through these slides, you may find that you have questions. We're going to leave some time after the presentation to answer those questions. And I would ask you to please put your questions into the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. And when we conclude the presentation, we'll take a look at those questions and we'll do our best to answer all of them. Hope that makes sense. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. Hopefully we can see slides moving here. We are in fact showing the PowerPoint presentation. Yep, good. All right, so we'll start with a little commercial. Since I'm the marketing man here at Zadara, I can't help myself. I want to tell you a little bit about us and who we are. We are an advanced technology partner for AWS. We have been since 2011. We are the pioneer in enterprise storage as a service, and in fact, we began life expressly with the aim to work with AWS and to complement AWS and help AWS users get more out of AWS in the system. We're very pleased about that, and in fact, today's presentation will be a specific example of how we do that. Here are some other examples. We are trusted by IT professionals worldwide. You may or may not have heard of Zadara prior to coming to today's webinar or being invited to today's webinar. We understand that. We have operated for a number of years now, and we're very proud to say that we have customers around the world, and we operate on multiple continents. With that short commercial out of the way, let's talk a little bit about today's story. SpendHQ. Matthew, I'm very pleased to have you with us today. I hope that you can perhaps start with just a brief overview of SpendHQ and what you do. I'd love for people to know a little bit more about your company.
Absolutely. So just as displayed on the right, we're ultimately a full service SaaS application that delivers services to the procurement industry to analyze their spend ultimately. I lead the technology, the application development and infrastructure of SpendHQ, working closely with DevOps and infrastructure and operations team to ultimately deploy and design load balanced and disaster recoverable data solutions within the SaaS offering.
Excellent. And of course, as a SaaS offering, you're very comfortable with the cloud. You're very comfortable with the idea of working in that model where you are buying the services that you need, scaling as you need. And I imagine you were attracted to AWS for exactly those reasons. Talk a little bit about how you're using AWS.
Absolutely. So ultimately, we use AWS just like most people for the what's the right word? The dynamicity of the service. So we primarily use Amazon for a lot of the compute, and then Zadara helps us complement that by leveraging their VPSAs for us to have that disaster recoverable solution that we can offer to our end users.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we're going to take a look in the next slide about your setup a little bit. But when you mentioned disaster recovery, talk a little bit about that. DR obviously is a hot topic, and people are taking a more strategic view of disaster recovery than perhaps ever before, thanks to some of the threats that we're all more aware of, unfortunately, than we've ever had to be in the past. DR, I imagine, is a strategic initiative for you as well. Talk a little bit about it.
Absolutely. So we follow the traditional model, whereas we have our core data services over on the East Coast, which are replicated over to the West Coast. What we found, which is extremely helpful with Zadara, is just the ease of, say, for example, we have new volumes, new data that needs to be migrated over to the West Coast. It's very easy for us to go ahead and execute on that with the management interface that we get with Zadara.
Well, let's take a look at that. I promised we'd take a look at that slide. Here it is. You mentioned your East Coast, West Coast. Here we have it on the map. And what's interesting is, of course, you have your backup over in East and West, and you have production. I know there's some other things you're doing. Of course, you do primary storage in addition to the disaster recovery. Talk a little bit about the primary storage. I thought, if I recall correctly, you're also working with us and AWS to develop future requirements, and you're able to develop and test with this system.
Correct. So ultimately, with the setup we have today, we're in a unique position where we can deploy POCs on both the compute EC2 side, in addition to the Zadara storage side, very quickly, so that it really keeps us agile, so we can keep developing solutions and offer them to the end users a lot faster.
So you're developing in the exact environment in which you'd be deploying, it sounds like.
Ultimately, so sometimes that won't be the case. It depends, but typically we keep it where the core data is, which is on the East Coast, and we keep the disaster side segregated out onto the West Coast.
Very good. And the performance with Zadara and AWS, how's your experience been?
It's been very, very good, and we've leveraged the relationship with Zadara a lot, where we've worked with Zadara to ultimately leverage a technology called multipath, which is really, we've seen big increases in read and write performance, which has helped on use cases when it comes to databases, etc. Oh,
nice. Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. You talk about that. I think it's fair to say that the customers like yourself that we're most used to dealing with are customers where performance is absolutely a key operating requirement. And we know enterprise storage, even just by its very nature, is performance oriented, right? This is not simple storage. This is stuff that's complex, and performance is always going to be a key requirement. But when you get into the cloud environment, I think people typically think about cloud, and historically have thought that there are trade-offs to be made in terms of performance, and we like to think that we can help eliminate some of those trade-offs and give customers a more full-featured set, a full set of features and functionality, and more of the performance and the control that they're used to experiencing with an on-prem data center. Is that it? Would you say that's been a fair statement of your experience?
I would say so, absolutely. The only thing I'll add on top of that is just the flexibility with protocols that ultimately Zadara offer to attach those volumes to whatever operating system we use.
Oh, that is a good point. We're going to talk a little bit later about some of that in some slides. I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's talk, you'll see that, by the way, and I want to point this out, Matthew, because we talked about this earlier, I have dimmed the second virtual private storage array that we have for you in the East Coast location. As I recall, Recently, we have taken that out of the equation, and I think it's a good example of how we allow customers to scale up and down, and of course, back up again should you need to in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was ultimately one of the POC environments that we were referring to earlier. And so yes, spooling up and down is extremely easy and pretty much almost immediate, and we could see those cost savings, moving forwards very transparently.
It's good to hear. I'm glad that we can give you that experience. That's one of our, one of the things we like to talk about, and we're very proud of. It's fun to see that it's being put into practice here. Let's take a quick look and a deeper dive into how you're connected to AWS. In fact, I really like this graphic because, of course, we put a little graphic of a road as though we're right across the street. In fact, we are in the Equinix data center, EdgeConneX data centers, with the Zadara storage. And then thanks to the magic of Direct Connect, we're connected right into the EC2 instances that you referenced earlier. I know that security is a big requirement for you. Talk a little bit about that and how that affected your decision here and how it affects your operations.
Yeah, so ultimately, so we have a lot of security requirements that we have to abide by from a data standpoint. The main ones that we can discuss is some of the services that Zadara offer that's built in, like disaster encryption at rest that we use, in addition to complete isolation of the data, so we can literally point to the drives that are being used, that the data is being stored on for any given use case.
Oh, that is nice. Yeah, we do, and we'll see this in a slide or two later in the presentation. We do talk quite a bit about the benefits of multi-tenancy in the form of some of the convenience and efficiency, but the control and the security of a single tenant experience. And it's an interesting blend, and frankly, not easy to pull off. But it is one of the hallmarks, one of the key features at Zadara, for the reasons you state, the reasons that you take advantage of it. So good. Now we're going to dive a little more deeply. In fact, this is a good example of what we were just talking about in terms of the isolation of certain drives and certain servers, as well as a good example of how when you're using certain resources, you pay for them, and when you're not using certain resources, even though they may be set aside, there is no charge for it. Walk us through. So we have Oregon and we have Virginia. I think it's fair to say that Oregon being the backup, we have a smaller environment for you over there.
That's correct. So we leverage two different ultimately types of storage. We have SSDs, which are much more performant on the East Coast, and we just use solid, ultimately SATA drives over on the West Coast. Ultimately, because it's a DR environment, we're not really concerned about performance because our DR is, it's not anticipated that it's going to be used for any long period of time. So yeah,
makes sense. Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, we do offer those options. We rolled out NVMe as a protocol earlier this year, giving more options, and we see customers taking advantage of the right option for the use case they have, just like you're doing. So let's talk about some of the business benefits, because ultimately, right, this is what it's about. I mean, it's, nobody wakes up in the morning. I like to joke. Nobody wakes up in the morning saying, "Gee, I think I want to buy more storage." I'm sure everybody on this webinar would agree. We all purchase storage and IT more broadly to serve some business purpose, and so we take that responsibility very seriously here at Zadara, and we like to make sure that we are helping our customers achieve their business objectives. And in the case of SpendHQ, it sounds like we've talked a bit about the DR and the primary storage. Talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, about agility. I was really glad to hear you mention that earlier, and I think all of us are under more and more pressure these days to be agile. Simply we don't necessarily know what the future holds. it sounds like we're throwing up our hands and saying, gee, I don't know, but it's a very difficult operating environment right now. And to have I don't know anybody's crystal ball that extends too far out there into the future, in other words. Talk a little bit about agility and what you're seeing with, obviously with Zadara and with, I think for our audience, with other issues that might be related to that or tangential to it. I think agility is on everybody's minds.
Absolutely. So ultimately, there's 3 points that we've really benefited from. The first being just how dynamic the solution is, the ability for us to really leverage adding additional drives, removing drives when we need to, changing their type on demand, and again, launching disaster recoverable volumes is a massive in our business. So that's been a great help, because typically those kind of processes take long periods of time in a dedicated environment. The second is Zadara has really provided a faultless technical and account support solution to SpendHQ. We get a lot of issues, if there are any issues, which there really haven't been that many in the relationship that we've had so far. They get typically resolved within the hour. So it makes managing that data tier for us a lot less challenging. And finally, it's just ultimately we really can stay truly agile, and we can move fast and eliminate any of those unnecessary costs pretty quickly.
This is cool, and again, this is a result of the combination of AWS and Zadara, and I just can't emphasize enough what a pleasure it is to be able to work with AWS as a partner, to be able to extend their capabilities and to deliver to SpendHQ the kind of benefits that we've just been talking about. And so I want to make sure that we take a few minutes here to really go deeper into why AWS, why we feel strongly that it's an excellent platform. And for that, Anthony, please take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Matt. So as Greg mentioned, I do want to spend a few minutes on what sets AWS apart and why AWS. So first thing that customers love about AWS is our economics. So customers are able to make use of infrastructure as they use it. So pay-as-you-go pricing. There's no need to over-provision your resources. You basically pay as you go and pay for what you need. There's also no upfront investment required. For AWS, you simply spin up your resources and pay for them as you use them. Also, our ease of use is also loved by our customers in terms of both our UI with our AWS Management Console and the many different APIs that we have for integration, both by using the AWS CLI as well as the many SDKs that we have available in different languages. Also, what sets us apart is that we're durable and secure. So customers don't have to worry about securing their own data centers, making their data centers resilient, setting up backup generators, all that undifferentiated heavy lifting that comes with running and managing data centers. AWS does that for you. So it's a very nice benefit of using AWS. And in the case of backups, you don't need to worry about tapes anymore. So as we'll see later, there's a S3 component of this solution where you don't have to worry about physical tapes anymore, and everything's just stored in object storage. So really great story there. Another great thing is the speed, agility, and scale. So agility is key. So that came up a number of times so far. And what AWS does is through our managed offerings such as EC2, RDS, and whatnot, it allows customers to focus on running their businesses. It allows them to really to develop applications that differentiate themselves from their competition and delight their customers, rather than having to worry about managing infrastructure, getting alerts at 3 a.m. for failed components or power outages or flooding. All of this is managed by AWS on behalf of the customer. So lastly, I want to talk about our storage partners, such as Zadara. So where Zadara really helps fit in here, and we'll see it in the later slide, is our storage partners really help us just complement our offerings. So it really takes AWS, both our global infrastructure and our services offerings, and really helps complement and fill in the gaps and really just continue on that that path of customer delightment. So next thing I want to talk about is just storage, AWS storage in general. As a platform, we're very mature. We've got a number of different services that are noted on this slide. We're going to talk about, so we'll talk a little bit about S3 and Direct Connect since Zadara is integrating with them. But we have very mature offerings that only continue to mature, that again our customers love, and we have a number of different offerings in the file, block, and object space, as well as the data transfer, because customers are asking us that they've got larger and larger amounts of data that they want to be able to move and migrate into AWS, and are looking for different ways in which to do so. And what I'll also talk about here is really how these build upon one another. So we've got the components of AWS storage that we looked at in the previous slide, and then we've got our AWS technology partners, like Zadara, who basically build on top of that, and really, again, help complement those storage offerings and provide services and offerings to our customers that they're asking for and they're demanding. We've also got our APN consulting partners who help deliver those services. So a lot of times when timelines are tight, or maybe your organization doesn't have the skill sets needed to rapidly to hit those project deadlines, that's where our consulting partners, as well as our managed services partners, can come in and really help really help your staff implement a lot of these solutions.
It's interesting, Anthony, you talk about things in terms of, that we like to talk about too, in terms of allowing companies to focus on their own business, right, and their core competencies, yes, and not worry about having to run a complex IT operation. I think Absolutely. More and more companies are coming to see the benefit of that, they're coming to see the true cost of owning and operating a data center and making the switch. But it's been a long time coming, no doubt. I think it's fair to say that these types of changes are serious. No company is going to want to make a change to their IT organization without first thinking about it very carefully. And I think with AWS, what you've shown here is that you've put together a comprehensive solution and offering that really has addressed all of the needs of somebody who's looking to change their operating mode and how they want to do this, including working with companies like Zadara. So we think it's smart. We certainly enjoy it, and we're going to talk a little bit now about what that means. And here we go. We are what we like to say is a complete enterprise storage as a service platform. And what we mean by that is encapsulated in these three rectangles. They're not exactly squares, are they? They're rectangles on the screen. We do offer a variety of options in terms of the storage media and features and functionality like snapshots and mirroring and high availability, encryption in flight and at rest. These are features that if you're used to managing enterprise storage, you of course expect, and you'll find them with Zadara. Again, full cloud model, whether you're deploying on-prem, and we do offer systems that we ship on-prem, or in the cloud, like we are talking about here today. The cloud model is the only model here at Zadara, and you only pay for what you use. And then I was really glad, Matthew, that you talked earlier about your experience working with our DevOps and service and support team, because we take a very proactive approach. It really is a fully managed service. After all, it is called storage as a service for a reason. And the word service we take very seriously. We offer 100% uptime SLA. We are operating at 5.5 nines over the last several years. When we say 100% SLA, of course, what we mean is that if we don't achieve 100%, we make good on that. And at 5.5 nines, we're proud of our performance, and we have very little opportunity to have to go make good. Let's dive in a little more deeply to a few of the features. Matthew mentioned these earlier. It's important that we hit on them. We have both NAS and SAN and NFS, CIFS, Active Directory. It's important. iSCSI interfaces, and all the features I mentioned. Really, what we like to say is that you're not making sacrifices. When you use Zadara, you are getting everything that you would expect in enterprise storage. Anthony mentioned a few minutes ago, we do back up to S3, very important. Many of our customers take advantage of this. We think this is a super convenient and very cost-effective way to go when you're looking to put together a backup plan, a disaster recovery plan, or any kind of a high availability plan. We do offer a multi-zone high availability, and that's something that you can learn a little bit more about at our website if you're curious. Bringing Amazon S3 into the equation is a great way to add a backup tier that is really convenient, really cost-effective. We've seen a huge growth in VMware Cloud and AWS. Many of you on today's webinar may already be using this service. You may be contemplating using it. Again, along the lines of no sacrifices, no trade-offs. If you are interested in making storage available to multiple virtual private clouds, we can do that. And we have lots of information about that. It's outside the scope of today's webinar specifically, but is a hot topic, and you'll find more about that at our website and in future webinars, I should point out. Mention encryption. Security really is that important. I wanted to make sure that we included a slide here so you know just how seriously we take this issue. In fact, with our dedicated resources, we do dedicate drives to individual customers. You have the option as a Zadara customer to shred those drives after use if you are so inclined. We do have several customers that take advantage of that. Obviously, that arrangement costs something, but it's there for you if security is that important. And I don't think that that type of an arrangement is typically available in a cloud model, but because of our dedicated resources, we can make that available. Speaking of availability, where are we available? We're available in 16 AWS regions. There are 22 currently, right, Anthony? 22 regions? I think.
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. I want to make sure I get that number right. We're proud to be in these. If there's a region that we're not currently in, but you would like us to be in, anybody listening in on this webinar, reach out to us. Let us know. We can be up and running in a new region very, very quickly in a matter of days, typically, and happy to do so. Or in fact, if you reach out to us and talk about it, you may find that it's already in our roadmap and we have plans to roll out there because we are rolling out new regions all the time. Again, being an AWS partner, we're in the marketplace as well. It gives us a very convenient way to give our customers access to Zadara and to do it in a way that's convenient for them, fully integrated. Our customers like to take advantage of this because sometimes it's just easier to track all of your account charges on one consolidated bill. So if that's interesting to you, but please go to the marketplace and check it out. You'll find it under the listing of Zadara. You can see it here, a picture of what that looks like. So let's summarize. Enterprise control and cloud agility is what we like to say we offer, and we do that when we combine with AWS. We do that by adding functionality, like the kind we talked about, snapshots and replication, thin provisioning, all of that. Again, scaling up and down because that's in fact what the cloud model is all about, isn't it? We do offer different tiers, whether it's HDDs or SSDs, and you have total control over which you choose and how you choose to deploy. There's complete flexibility, in other words, in terms of the type of storage you might be needing, whether it's block, file, or object, and what storage media you might want to use. And if you're interested, just as we've talked about with Matthew today, region to region DR setup, and you can, of course, have all of the data sovereignty and security that you're looking for. And finally, and we can't stress this enough, and this goes to the point that we talked about with Anthony here a few minutes ago, having a proactive approach to support and management is key. We really are a storage partner. We have a management layer here. We have no access to our customers' data. And in fact, if you lose the keys, you're in real trouble because we don't have them. So we caution our customers to guard those keys very carefully. But we do have a management layer, a global management layer, and it's software that we developed. It's proprietary, that allows us to see the performance of every virtual private storage array deployed around the world at every second. And what we do and what our team does, and our support team is on 4 different continents, we keep an eye on things. And although alerts and notifications are automated and part of our system, we like to follow up and be proactive and make sure that our customers are aware of any issues that might impact their operations. So that's the approach we take, because again, storage as a service means that we need to approach it like a service. It's great for me to talk about it, and it's certainly a real pleasure to have Matthew and Anthony here joining me on today's call. And I want to thank you both. But really, the best way we have found, and I think we've all had this experience, the best way is to just try it for yourself. We recommend that, and so we put together a free trial. You can see a link here. It's at Zadara.com, and you can do that. If a free trial isn't what you need, we do recommend you go straight over to AWS Marketplace and add a Zadara VPSA to your environment. You can do that very quickly there. It'll take you just a few minutes to set up. And when you do, whether you commence a free trial or whether you add us at Marketplace, what you'll find is that proactive support I was talking about in service, that's going to start right away. You'll find that we reach out in just a few minutes' time. We get alerted, of course, when you begin something like a free trial or you set something up in Marketplace. And one of our DevOps experts will reach out to schedule a time to talk with you about Zadara and help you get set up and roll it out. So we've done, I promised us half an hour. We've done 33 minutes. My apologies for going a little bit over. But we do take your time very seriously, and we want to make sure that we are providing enough time for questions here at the end. Again, Matthew and Anthony, thank you very much for being a part of this and for telling your story. I hope that everybody on this webinar has found it useful. I hope you've learned something today about perhaps a way that you can incorporate AWS and Zadara into your operations and to help you perhaps more cost effectively achieve your business objectives. I'm sure you might have questions. I'd like to take a few minutes now to ask you to please put questions into the questions panel here, and we can answer them. If we don't get to all of the questions today, by the way, we will follow up with an email, and we can be sure to address them that way. I'm reading the questions now. I see we have one. Anthony, this one's for you because it's about AWS. 16 of 22 AWS regions. What are some of the other ones? And what new regions might you have on the drawing board? So Anthony, what regions are we not in? 16 out of 22, we're missing 6.
Sure. So, so I can talk a little bit about our. Let me talk a little bit about our 22 geographical regions. So, so we currently have the 22 geographical regions. We have plans for. We've announced plans for 4 additional regions, both in Indonesia, Italy, South Africa, and Spain, that are going to be coming soon. And out of that, so we've got 69 availability zones within the 22 regions, and we will be adding 13 availability zones with those 4 regions.
Oh, very good. Okay, good. That's good to hear. For all the reasons we talked about earlier, people are certainly going to be wanting to understand how to take advantage of those availability zones when they're doing their planning. And so let's talk. There's another question coming in here. I don't know if I have it exactly right, but it says, it looks like I can use Zadara for storage and EC2 for compute. How does that work exactly? Okay. It's a fair question. We talked about Direct Connect. I want to go back to that slide because I think that might be useful for everybody. I'm flipping backward. I'm sure you can all see me going backward on these slides. There we go. I like this one because of the way it, I think, so clearly demonstrates our relationship. I'm sure people might want to know a little bit more about Direct Connect. I think I'm reading between the lines on this question, but Anthony, can you talk a little bit more about Direct Connect and how that works?
Sure. So Direct Connect is so basically what Direct Connect is a dedicated line from a customer's data center to basically to an AWS, to AWS. So it can be in multiple speeds. Typically, we see them in the 1, or we can even go up to 10 gigabits per second in terms of speed. But basically, that allows customers to get the highest performance, highest throughput, lowest latency in between their environments and AWS. And in the context of Zadara and AWS, that just means that you've got you basically got the lowest latency connection possible to our availability zones and regions, significantly providing your customers with lower latency and that higher throughput.
Thanks for mentioning that. I think that's what I was hearing in sort of reading between the lines in that question. Is a question of just how predictable and how high performance is this environment with Direct Connect, and I think you've addressed it. So thank you for that. There's a question coming in about scaling up and scaling down and paying only for what you use. How flexible is that? Let me address that for Zadara. Of course, we're all familiar with AWS and that model, pioneers in the model, right, in the cloud model. We offer an identical experience in that whether you take our storage on-prem or in the cloud, and you can see that when we say cloud, of course, and this slide is still up on the screen, so I'll use this as an example, whether we're at Equinix, one of our data storage partners worldwide, or EdgeConneX, or any of our other many data storage partners. We have over 200 points of presence around the world. You are in fact purchasing capacity and performance, throughput. What are you looking for there? And then you can in fact take advantage of certain contracts. We do offer certain discounts for contracts, and we don't need to get into too much of it here, but of course we like to offer incentives, and if you'd like to sign up on a contract for a certain term, certain period of months or even years, we can do that, and like to offer some discounts as an incentive to do that. But regardless, when you are using our storage, you set up a VPSA, virtual private storage array, in a certain capacity, and when you hit the button and set it up and make it live, that's when the billing begins. And when you turn it off, the billing ends. It's really that simple. And we have an interface, a software interface. I know we haven't shown it in this particular webinar. Software interface is a standard interface. If you're familiar with running storage arrays of any kind, then you know exactly what our interface looks like and what it can do. And so you get all of the control to provision these things and to commission them and decommission them as needed. All right, so let's talk, Matthew, there's a question that I think might be good for you. Talking a little bit about disaster recovery and your backup. Let me go back to that. So in your backup environment, I guess they're looking for a little bit more detail on what you have set up there. You're mirroring to Oregon. Maybe we can just take a few minutes to talk a little bit more about what you've done there.
Yeah, so ultimately, we have, well, the drivers that we use first and foremost cover multiple different use cases. So ultimately, we have a database that's relatively high performance, in addition to other repositories that we ultimately need mirrored to help us with those disaster recovery scenarios. So ultimately, we have all of those mirrored over. We have the ability to define any kind of snapshot policies we want on those mirrors. So whether whatever our RTO RPOs are, we can really just nail those time frames down through the mirroring tool within Zadara. So it's super easy for us to ultimately set that up.
I'm glad you mentioned the RTOs and the RPOs, right? You hit on I think an important point, and that may be what this question is really about. Is that everybody knows they've got certain objectives for recovery, and they need to meet those objectives, and you're able to dial in the performance to meet your objectives. That's what it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think that's certainly going to be how people approach this. I'm going to get back to our last slide here so that I can put back up on screen the free trial. We are getting near the end of our 45 minutes together. Just have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure I put that up on the screen. I would encourage everybody to reach out to us if you have questions after this webinar. Maybe something pops into your head after we hang up and we're done. Certainly that happens to me from time to time. I think of something only later, and so I would encourage you to reach out. You can see support.zadara there on the screen, and you may find some answers to your questions about Zadara there. AWS, I think we all know, has a wonderful knowledge base. And if you have questions about AWS, I recommend you go there to read up more about their services or any questions you might have about their services. So we're here to support you, to answer your questions, whether you're looking at adding a cloud to your operating environment because you like to extend your on-prem and to operate more what we might call a hybrid model, then and you're just beginning that, then I would very much encourage you to ask the questions, both of us and of AWS, because you really want to be careful here. Hybrid is definitely the model that we're seeing, and we're seeing it for all the practical reasons you would expect, right? That it's really about making sure that the data that you and your business need in order to operate is made available securely and affordably to the people in your business wherever they might be located. And increasingly, that just simply requires that we operate in a mixed mode and a hybrid mode, and it greatly adds to the complexity of our operating environments, and that's we see a big push to go to AWS and to go to the cloud and to bring in experts in particular areas like AWS and Zadara in the case of enterprise storage, to simply relieve you of some of that complexity, the cost too, of course, but that complexity. So I hope everybody has found today's webinar useful. Anthony and Matthew, again, thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate it. Any final thoughts? Any comments?
No, I just wanted to say, Greg, thank you, and Matt, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thanks, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you and joining you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.